He's using an Apple, folks, which should be easier for us, but for people that are PC based. Okay, how are we going there, mate? Can you get it up on mine? It's not coming? Let me go and sort it for you.
I can start talking. So that was Tamara and I's first time watching that video as well. We hadn't seen that. But yeah, James has worked very hard on that. Tamara mentioned sort of earlier this week, we're speaking this Sunday. Would you be able to get a video done? And so I think it would have been about 2 o'clock his time that he sent that through. So yeah, he's done a great job with that. So we had our team trip to South Africa, as most of you should have known. And yeah, I mean, we'll hear lots of stories in a moment, but it was an incredibly busy time, but it was a pretty amazing time. So there was 11 of us that went across. There was Tamara and I. Then there was Jimmy, Jana and Everly. We've also got Amy and Susie, who actually found out about Hands through Cara from working at Shire Christian School. And then we have Nicole and Jack, who regulars at PACC would know, who couldn't make it today. And then Beth, one of Jana's high school friends, there you go. And then Alice. Alice is there on sort of the bottom row on the right-hand side. And she was from Melbourne. We only met her in Perth Airport. She was keen to come along. They didn't have room on the Melbourne team, so she jumped into ours. And she was a great addition as well. So that's the team. And so just to give you an overview of sort of what it looked like for our time, so we got in there on a Friday, and then sort of spent the Friday to Sunday doing a few touristy things. You saw some of the video from Kruger National Park of some of the animals, and Blyde River Canyon, which is the big canyon area as well. And then we got into sort of our main program on that first week. We were in a few different communities, but the community that we spent the most time in was a place called Maluti. And so we were just able to sort of get used to what it is like to actually be on the ground there. We did visits to children's homes, and we also got to run a Kids Day activity. So someone might be sharing about that later, but that was a lot of fun. We really loved it there in Maluti. And then we had 2 separate other days in different other communities. And some of them were really hard. It's hard just sort of going into a community just for one day, especially when you can really see the brokenness there. We finished up the first week with that. Then we had our weekend where we went to church, saw some chimpanzees and some more elephants. And then for our last week, we did that painting project which you saw, which I think someone is going to share a bit about later. So that was kind of the rough overview of our time. And you can see there we have a map behind us. For those who know a bit of geography, African geography. So we were up sort of in the northeastern side of South Africa, just where that hand is pointing to, around an area called White River. I won't waffle on any longer. I think, is it Jimmy is up first? Jimmy, if you want to come up, you can take it away. Thanks.
Looking good. Okay, cool. I am wearing the same jumper. It did make it back with me. Unlike some things we've used. Am I close enough? Too far away? You can hear me? That's cool. I should be on my tippy toes, that's all. And no one can see me. Anyway, all right, it's fine. This is my first trip to Africa. I've known of Hands for a long time now. And it was amazing. It really was. So I think my main concern of going was we could have done this easier. We could have gone 7 years ago when we were in a better position and we didn't have an 18-month-old. So I think travelling with an 18-month-old for quite a distance was a concern of mine. I just didn't want to be that parent in the plane, that crying baby that everyone gets off and wants to kill. Luckily, we weren't that parent, or we weren't those parents. So going over there, I was like, I've done mission trips before. I kind of know what I'm walking into. I've heard all the stories, seen all the videos, spoke to many people. I know people over there. So I'm not walking in not knowing anything, which would have been rather daunting. But I think going over and actually being a part of hands and understanding hands really put it all together for me. Actually being able to put all the little connections back into place to see the bigger picture of what hands actually does and how it works. So that was one thing that I really took away from Africa, was the organisation of hands and what it does differently to every other organisation in Africa. Because I do have I had an idea of, you go to Africa because it's a Christian tick box. Everyone goes to Africa to tick your little Christian box saying, I've done a mission trip. And I think there are so many people in Africa helping Africa in all its brokenness. Hands does it differently. And that was real eye-opening to actually see that, because I did go over with that. It's almost a bit of a tick box. But why are these people so different and so special? The ability of hands to be able to enable Africa and the local, I'll call them indigenous people, to help themselves. It's not, I'm white, which already puts me in the top 15% of the country and with extreme power. I'm not coming in to help you and then leave. I'm coming in to help you help yourself. And then I can leave, because now you've got the skills and the ability to be able to start helping your own community. And I think that was a big eye-opening thing for me. And something that I loved, and the model of hands I can see be used everywhere. Some of the great stories that were sort of funny to watch, but when you reflect back onto it, you can see a good teaching within it. Everly is the star of this story. You probably saw in the video one of the children take Everly off me. So that was coming back from a water point where every Wednesday the government might bring a truck, you don't know, of water, fill up these tubs, and then you've got to get what you need for hopefully the week, but if not more. There was a baby there that was only, I'd say 2.5-ish, bawling his eyes out as soon as we turned up. And I was sort of thinking, he's a bit lost maybe, because you don't know who owns who over there. So we're kind of like, oh, he's okay. But Everly really wanted to look after him. So she's gone up to give him a hug, which kind of made it a little bit worse. And that was okay. We're like, oh, it's all right, Evs. Like, you can sort of sit with him. You don't need to hug him. And then we walk off and we come back. So we've done one trip, we come back again. And he starts bawling his eyes out again. Once again, Everly goes up to try and comfort this poor child. And the people that are getting water are just laughing their heads off, thinking it's the funniest thing ever. The translator finally tells us that he's petrified of Everly because he's never seen someone so little and so white, that this is a whole new experience, which really... And then, of course, Everly's trying to comfort, which is making it worse. And in the end, someone stepped in and helped him, and it was all okay. Which really showed you how, no matter how old you are, no matter what language you have, you can care for anyone. And Evie showed that time and time again. She was, I reckon, a true star of the entire trip. Evie got to be a kid. Evie got to do what kids do with no pressures of our world, no iPhones, no iPads, just got to eat dirt and enjoy getting dirty. And who wouldn't, really? Which was pretty amazing to see how you don't need language, and Evie connected with like people of all ages as soon as she got off the plane and we got into communities. Another thing I really liked is I went over with the idea of I'm going into a culture and this is fun. But I love to be submersed within a culture. I love to go over and understand, why do you live the way you live? And doing home visits really opened my eyes up to that. Seeing the way people live, the constant fear that children have over there because they can't lock their front doors. We turned up to one place, this is also the same family we did the water drop with, that there were 6 of them in, I would say, maybe about a 3-metre square house with no windows, a door that was really flimsy and had no locks, which then means anyone could walk in at any time, do whatever they want, and walk out and really not be held accountable to it. So these kids, as soon as that sun comes down, are incredibly vulnerable. And that was really eye-opening as well, that we were staying in a place that you lock the door, put a metal bar on, and there's an electric fence that went all the way around us. These kids don't have any of that. They've got, hopefully someone falls asleep against the door so no one can walk in. That was incredibly eye-opening as well. I kind of grow up going, I want my kids to have their own room. These guys are after at least a 6-foot by 1 metre square to sleep on, and they're considered lucky. So that was incredibly eye-opening as well for me. So as we came back, it was a bit of a, do I really need 1 room per child? Probably not. We can put bunk beds in. We get beds. Like, just the basic necessities to our life that they don't have over there was completely eye-opening. So that was one thing that I really loved about going to Africa and my experience of Africa. As I keep going through, different aspects and different stories pop up, or you see different photos. They bring up different emotions. They bring up, oh, remember that, remember this. And from that, I just think about it, and then I might ponder and learn something I don't know. God has a funny way with that he just teaches you in the most unexpected times. So that was Africa. That was one of my stories. I probably waffled a bit, which is fine. If you want to know more, come and ask me over the weeks. And I'll have more photos and things to be able to show you as well. That's it, but thank you.
Right. Okay. Right. That's me, my younger years. No, that's Everly. I think, to start with, my biggest fear of coming home was actually sharing. I didn't know that we're going to share at church, but was telling people about my trip, because I work in a secular workforce and they don't understand why you would spend your school holidays going over to Africa to care for people. And so my biggest fear was when they say, how was your holiday? To tell them about it. Because one, I didn't want to downplay what we learnt in Africa, but also the stories and the people, because they're so special, that I didn't want to make it seem so small, because it's not. So I'm hopefully going to share, and that you guys can see the deep relationship and care that we have for especially the stories that you'll hear today. So one thing, we had a lot of meetings in the morning before we went out into community, and Hands with all the volunteers would meet up most mornings. And one of the mornings, one of the Hands volunteers, her name is Jen, shared with us, and she said, I want you, we'd been in community for a whole week, and she goes, I want you to tell me, yell out some of the names of the kids that you've met. And so we're calling out names of the kids that we've met. And she goes, what you don't realise is that you may be the only person that knows that child's name, that is praying for that child. And that struck me in that I brought my daughter over who is known by so many people, who had so many people praying for her safety, for her health while in Africa. And yet, that child that we yelled their name out, we may be the only one praying for that child. So with that in mind, one of the stories that I'm holding on to, coming back, and also praying for deeply now that we're home. I'm going to change her name for her own protection, but her name's Rachel for the story's sake. Rachel, we went into community. This is in Fanani, so this was our second week where we did the painting project. And we arrived, and Paula, like you see in the first picture, didn't smile. And even though all these kids that we meet have horrible backgrounds and have so much trauma in their lives, usually when you walk into community, there's this light and that they smile and they're excited to see you. But with Paula, it was different. There was no smile and there was a lot of sadness. And later on that week, Audrey, one of the care workers that was kind of our translator, but also would take us into community, who knows these communities back to front, and is an amazing woman, told us of her story. She told us that actually Rachel is a twin, and we didn't meet the twin in community. Her mother is one of the care workers at Fanani, and also kept to herself and was quiet. We were told that a year ago, Rachel and her twin brother were playing outside at home, and their mother went in to quickly get some stuff to give them a bath, but had left a big pot of boiling water. In Africa, they cook on fires in boiling waters in huge pots. And so she had left for just a second, and within that time, little Rachel had accidentally pushed her brother into this boiling pot of water. As a result, he passed away. And so to hear that, we can understand now the sadness, and you can see the sadness and the deep hurt that this little girl faces. And as a mum, I went in with my mum goggles, which was really nice compared to my 2009 trip. I wasn't married, I didn't have children. And I just thought, how do you, as a mum, keep loving that child? And how does Rachel continue to live life even though she feels this guilt and this hurt? And what was so special is that Rachel's mum is a care worker within the community, and she comes even though with all her brokenness and her pain, and serves and cares for these children. And I thought, what an inspiration that this mum puts all of that aside to feed and make sure these kids continue to survive. And so I think that's one of the things that I've been able to bring home with me, is that through it all, as a mum, we need to love others and care for those in our community. And yeah, particularly with Everly, I want to teach her to love others better, put others first. And yeah, I think one of the biggest things is through all this heartbreak and sadness that we saw, you still walk away with hope when you leave, knowing that within the community there's hands, but when hands isn't there, there's Jesus. And you want to give credit to hands, but hands will keep telling you it's not us, it's Jesus. And so I will keep praying for little Rachel and her mother. And yeah, by the end of the week, as you can see, Leighton was able to get her to smile, which is really exciting, because I think that we all went in going, we just want to make this kid smile. And it took nearly 5 days, but we did it. And yeah, hopefully she continues to heal. And then on an Everly perspective, one thing that was so beautiful was the way that they cared for each other, all the kids for each other, but also for Everly in the way that they embraced her, even down to when the first picture they would just help her wash her hands, and if she liked to roll in the mud. She loved it. The other kids were there dusting her pants off, and I just thought, that's so beautiful, and I would love to raise a daughter that does that for others. So that is my prayer for her. But yes, hopefully that made sense. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. First of all, I'd just like to say thank you for letting me come up and share. As someone who isn't actually a part of this church, I do attend another one, so thank you for this opportunity. This wasn't my first time to Africa. This was actually my second, so I've had previous experience in Rwanda before, so I suppose I was semi-prepared for what was going to be in front of me. I had seen the brokenness, I had already seen no money and everything like that. So last time I went over, I was mainly dealing with a primary school, so it was a completely different experience to come and be in these communities for 2 weeks instead as well. So the two girls that you see with me, and I know I wasn't the only one that was hanging out with them, they kept coming up to me and telling me how beautiful I was. And they would pat my skin, and they would pat my hair, and kept asking for photos with me. But I didn't do it until the last day. And then what happened was a pretty extreme amount of selfies that happened. And then suddenly other kids joined in, and then suddenly Jimmy joined in. And then suddenly there was another kid that came and joined in and just wanted to see what was going on, and instead his head actually took up most of the photo as well. But I was really struck by them, and I kept telling them, you are beautiful too. You know, and I kept trying to encourage them. And a couple of times I prayed with them as well, and I really reflected on what they had, and every day they kept coming up to me and telling me some little stories and things like that, and I tried to be with them as much as I can. I think, yeah, those girls really struck me in how much they wanted to be white, I guess, in being careful how I say that though, because I could see what we were doing, and on the last day they said to me that they loved me and they didn't want me to go. And I thought, 3 days and they're using the L word. That's pretty extreme. But I did not hesitate in returning that, because I loved it. Like, I loved being with them, and I loved the opportunity to hang out with them and to be with them. And it was really hard to say goodbye to these girls, knowing that, I mean, I really would like to say I want to be on the team next year immediately. In fact, the past week I've been very conflicted in being here and not back in South Africa. When the last few days were approaching in Africa, all I wanted to do was actually come home and repack my suitcase and head back over. That was pretty much it. So, and I remember getting home just before midnight on Saturday night, and coming into my room and then standing there and looking at all my possessions and thinking, it's a bit hard being here. And thinking, I mean, I left a few things behind to donate, and thinking how much more I should have left behind, and to do whatever I could. And it's been continually thinking on my mind. And I was conversing with some colleagues over the past week, and then how we were saying that how much more we need to do for our Indigenous population as well. And so there was this great big discussions in between. And so who knows what might come of that, but hopefully that's something that we can pray about as well. So yeah, I really thank God that I was able to spend 2 weeks. In fact, I actually got to spend 3 weeks in Africa, so I jumped back up to Rwanda beforehand and saw the people that I had met on my last mission, and I was really so I was quite lucky in the fact that I was already on Africa time when everyone arrived at 4 a.m. at Johannesburg airport, and I came out of my hotel at 6 a.m. and felt quite refreshed. And so I was quite happy to see everyone though. But I also just want to reflect a little bit on the time that we had in Funani. So that was the second week. So I just want to just quickly reflect on the painting project that we had there as well. So this community was able to become a life centre. And becoming a life centre meant that we actually got to paint their building for them. So their care workers chose the colour blue. And they were so excited. Once we got the paint there and the rollers out, they were so keen to get started, and they all picked up the brushes and helped as well. And that was just amazing to see. And just the colours that then came out of it as well, it was just so amazing. And then when the kids came and they already saw half the building was almost painted this beautiful blue, this beautiful sky blue. And then we, got to tell them, it's your turn. So they picked up their paintbrushes and picked up yellow and green and orange and purple, and they all had a little section and they all got to paint themselves. And it was just wonderful to see their excitement. And, they would paint one section. Can I paint another? Sure, we have a whole building. And so it was just the excitement and the care they took with painting as well, and were very open helped and shown how to use their paintbrushes and things like that. It was just beautiful to see that along there. And the team finished off the rest of what was needed the next day. So it was pretty amazing that building actually only took us 2 days to do, but the amount of hands that were on there and the amount of care that was being taken was just beautiful and thrilling and so exciting. And it's such a special memory, I think, for the team as well, that we get to be in there too. But if you don't know me, I'm actually an art teacher. So I also, on the last day in Funani, I actually got to teach an art class to the care workers. So that's what you'll see in the photo behind me as well. And so I showed them how to use watercolour pencils. And so like how with just a little bit of water, if you add water to these pencils, what amazing creations they could find. So it was really great that we were able to gift them each with a set of watercolour pencils. And we gave them some paper, and we gave them things like pencils and erasers and sharpeners and a photo frame. So they got to frame their own work as well. So we just did a bit of a practice sort of go on there, but I could already see how much they enjoyed it. Like the fact that they were just to be able to sit and do something creative and just enjoy. And we put out marshmallows and biscuits and things and some drinking water for them. I mean, it was hard not to eat the marshmallows myself. Marshmallows over there taste better than here, I think, as well. So that was it was probably something special for me because it was the last day and it was something that I was looking forward to for the 2 weeks. And that was the last thing that I got to do on that day as well. But just to see their joy and just drawing these little like flowers and trees and or leaves and whatever else they came up with in their mind as well. And they, lots of them said, I have not done this for years. Just the ability just to sit and draw and then use these watercolour pencils to create a little artwork for themselves. And lots of the care workers said, I'm going to go home and do this with my kids, which is just great that they're able to have this opportunity to create something colourful to hang up then in their own house as well. So I think my biggest thing is seeing the joy of these art and painting projects that I had the privilege of seeing and helping with. And then of course it would be coming back into my own classroom and then having students there who might not necessarily want to do these things as well, or kids who do take the pride and joy in their artworks. But not only that, just the joy of kids in general in Africa and how little they have, but how easy it was for most of them to smile at you and come and hold your hand and come and cuddle you, and the little kids who just would not let go as well. And sort of having to put that here in a first world country in the 21st century, it can be quite conflicting. So I suppose that's something that I'm reflecting on quite a lot and learning about. And I'm really thankful that God has let me have this opportunity over there. So thank you for listening. Please come and ask me any questions if you have any at the end. Thank you.
Hello, if you haven't met me before, I'm Amy. I worked with Cara a couple of years ago and worked with Susie and Libby, who's over there too, at Shy Christian for the last couple of years. Yeah, this is a few times, so if I've met you, hello again. If I haven't, yeah, I'm a little bit shy, but you can come and talk to me afterwards. Yeah, there's so many things I could say and what I could talk about from this trip. Yeah, I think like Susie, coming back to work, and thankfully both of our schools have had staff weeks this week, so it's been like a slow transition. But even still, in my planning for having my students back in my classroom, yeah, I'm faced with thousands of emotions and trying to work out where God wants me and how I can be a Christian, how I can put into place these lessons I've learnt from Africa in my context. Yeah, if I'm not meant to be in Africa at the moment, then I still need to be able to live that out here. So yeah, I'm still processing a lot, so I don't think this will be the most eloquent little summary, but bear with me. I guess the first thing to say is that this trip has been about 2 years in the making for me, ever since Cara came back from her 2-week trip in 2016. It's just like God has put that on my heart. I need to go. I didn't end up being able to be on the team last year, so I was like, sign me up. I don't care if there's a team or not, I'm going. So yeah, it's sort of been, it was weird going when there was such this big build-up. It was almost anticlimactic, but not really. I think particularly with the change of pace, you know, in my job, particularly within our society, we are living life at like 100 miles an hour, and yeah, you get over there and suddenly it's like you almost get whiplash because the pace just slows so dramatically, and I actually really loved it. Which is weird because I'm a doer. I you know, get everything done. You know, no time for talk. We just get in there. So yeah, it was a really interesting couple of weeks of yeah, being like, hey God, you know, what do you want with me? Why am I here? What do you want me to learn? I'm actually going to start with the lesson that I learnt, I think, and the stories that I'll tell hopefully should connect in there as well. So I think one of the biggest things that I learnt from my 2 weeks in Africa and the lead up and the processing over the last week as well has been just how things take time and how you need to be ready to put in the effort with the relationships, and that actually at the end of the day it's not what we do, it's what God does, and if he chooses to do that through us, then you know, that's awesome. We get a role to play in that. But a lot of these things that are happening, a lot of the beautiful, amazing things that Hands has been able to do actually have nothing to do with individual people, but a community who love God and who are praying to him and are giving up the worries and anxieties and the plans that they have and saying, here I am, Lord, you know, use me, take me, send me. So it was quite interesting actually during my Bible reading over there, which was another really great thing. The slower pace actually let me read my Bible properly for the first time in probably a year or so, which is actually really shameful to have to admit. But I thankfully had the notebook that you guys have here at PACC, and I chose to read through Psalm and Joshua while I was over there. And I got to Psalm 10, and suddenly it was like, oh, okay, wow, this is quite relevant. Why, Lord, do you stand far off? Why do you hide yourselves in times of trouble? There was all these cries out, and just as I'm reading that, and I just seen the huge contrast between cities of Johannesburg as we drove out. These amazing, little towns that are so full of life. And then just round the next corner, just down the next street, there's people living in a shed or a shack with, no proper electricity, no running water, no nothing. And just the brokenness that was there. And then later on in, all these Psalms, I really love this little section of the Psalms actually. It's, him crying out and saying, or most of them I think are from David, but him crying out saying, God, where are you? There's all this stuff that's happening and it's not good. But then he ends them all with a little praise, like, for the Lord is righteous, he loves justice, the upright will see his face, in Psalm 11 and Psalm 13. But I will trust in your unfailing love, my heart rejoices in your salvation. So there's all these things that I was like having to read and having to try to fit into my context in Africa. And I think one thing that popped out in a lot of these is that crying out for justice and that reliance on God, that at the end of the day God is still good. And I think one place I really saw that at Hands was on our last Friday, just before we had packed up and left. We had the huge privilege of being able to be part of their Hands on Deck, I think that's what it was called. And we got to hear all the stories of people who'd done little trips around or who just catching up on what has been happening in our communities over there. And I think for us, spending 2 weeks quite narrowed down on 4 communities, it was really easy to kind of lose that greater perspective and just see, it's great. You can see in the background of this image here, some of the painting project. We did that. That's pretty cool, but does it really matter? Or, we played with kids for 3 days, but, they're still in the same situation that they were in. So it was kind of this weird tension of like, we haven't actually done a whole lot. But then hearing at Hands on Deck how, some of the things that they shared, people have been praying about for years and years, and they keep faithfully going into these communities, even if there hasn't been like a huge dramatic growth or anything. They are so committed to that long-term investment, those relationships, and at the end of the day, it's God who's working in those situations, and it's Him who is bringing them into where He wants them to be. And so I love that we got to spend that last Friday morning actually being able to kind of zoom out and see the bigger picture and be able to reflect on the fact that it's a long-term investment. It will take time, it will take energy, it will take effort, and yet we can do what we can, but at the end of the day we need to be giving it over to Jesus, and He will choose to do it how He wants. And I think one thing for us as Westerners is we are very, we might not be the richest in our area, but we're in the top 1% of the whole entire world. If you live in the Southern Shire, if you have like a car, if you have a roof over your head, things like that. And so it was kind of weird going over and being like, it'd be great just to be able to chuck money at this and fix it all up. But actually to see that won't actually change anything. In fact, chucking money at it might actually make it worse. And so I think the other thing that kind of is linked into all this is the huge, so many layers of trauma. And so that's where I'll just quickly talk about this family here, this little girl. So her name, I don't know where, okay. Well, it's not even like it wasn't like an African name her name's Reality, which I found quite, it's actually quite a nice word. And her little brother, I can't remember how to say it, but it meant I wish. And so their mum was also a care worker. That's not them, it's just still the first one. They're another couple, but cute. Their mother was a care worker as well. She left school at age 10. She's 28 now, so she's got 2 kids. I think Reality's about 8 or 9, maybe 10. Their mother left school at between age 8 and 10 to care for her younger siblings because her mum had disappeared and the neighbours were actually poisoning her younger siblings when no one was at home to watch them. So her highest level of education was year 3. And so it was actually quite strange to see her daughter in pretty much the same situation, like the same age, but going to school, and actually, you know, the care point has allowed them to have a second chance at getting out of the cycle in a way. Yeah, there's just so many layers of this story, and I could talk about it. If you're interested, you can ask me later, but you know, there's so much abuse and hurt and pain, like her mother who just had disappeared, and they found her in the next community, and she kept waiting to go and speak to her, but eventually it was too late. She died before they could reconcile, and she doesn't have any work. She is a care worker, so that's all voluntary as well. So the care point will sometimes give her the leftovers to take home for dinner. And this little girl, I think she wore the same clothes most days that we were there, and her skirt was ripped, it had a hole in it, and you know, quite an awkward spot too, poor thing. But she is like, look at her smile. She was just so happy, and I felt quite broken and conflicted. I'm like, I just want to be able to fix this, but there's so many layers of that trauma that God's the only one who can actually get to the bottom of that. He's the only one that can truly heal. Yeah, he can use us, and that's amazing, but we've got to keep giving it to him. And then the next picture as well, these two little kids, they were beautiful. They were really annoying as well because they just wanted to be held the whole time. And, you know, it was actually, yeah, for me, who wanted to do things, like I wanted to be involved in the painting, I wanted to be able to help with the food or whatever. And suddenly I'm like weighed down by 2 kids, and little Esther there, she was not a light kid. Like her older sister would give her all the food, and I'm like, yeah, I can tell. So I'm trying to lug her around. But they were really new to the community. They also have a really, you know, hard story. I didn't get the chance to go to their house for a home visit, and I know a few other people did. So I think you can ask them about it. But from my understanding, they just from looking at them, they just wanted to be loved. They just wanted to be held. They just wanted to be children. And yeah, it was actually as annoying as it was because they would like cry if you put them down, and then there's about 5 kids also wanting a cuddle. So I think one day I was pinned down by about 5 or 6 kids. I'm like, man, I only have 2 arms. How do parents do this? But it actually, again, thinking about all the lessons I've learnt, it forced me to slow down and to think about the reason that we're actually here. It's not about doing the painting project, as amazing as that was. It's not about helping serve the food, even though that was really helpful. It's about being Jesus to these kids in a very small way. And yeah, I think that I left feeling like I'd learnt more and I'd gained more from this trip than I could have given. So it's quite hard being able to say, you know, when people are like, what did you do in Africa? I'm like, well, I don't know, I didn't really do a whole lot. But what was really important was those relationships, and was just getting down on their level, and yeah, that shared trauma that the communities share and that we all have inside of us too, it just looks different. It was actually really a healing experience for me, but a huge privilege, and yeah, hopefully there's something that made sense in there. So thank you for your time.
Oh, okay, thanks. Oh, so no, I don't need a second coffee. I'm learning to summarise. Just want to start at Genesis. So these 3 little children were very impactful to me. So these 3 children were in Funani. And similar to the ones Amy was talking about, they're quite new to the care point. So the boy who's standing next to me, who's 12 but almost taller than me, his name is Ami. And then his little sister, the one with the polka dots, is Veristra, which took me all 3 days to try and learn how to say. And then the littlest baby, who I think was about 2 years old, her name was Buthle, which means beautiful in Siswati or Shangaan. Anyway, one of those. But she was very beautiful, but she didn't give me much, as you can see from her facial expression. So I don't know, something about, you walk into community and at Funani there's 150 kids, so you could literally spend time with anyone. But for some reason, certain kids sort of grab your attention, and these 3 grabbed my attention, and I think it's because they were sort of off to the side and they didn't really want to involve themselves. And so I think that was, for me, an indication that they didn't quite feel like they fit yet, or they had struggles in trying to involve themselves. But what really struck me was Army, and he just looked after his little sisters so, so beautifully. They're learning how to catch, which everyone at that age is, but he was so patient. We were playing with a very deflated ball, and he would throw it, and it would normally hit Varisha in the face and then drop, and then she would pick it up again and throw it again. And I think, and then she actually got quite good. She caught it sometimes more than me, which is a bit embarrassing. But the care that he took, the love that he had for them was just so beautiful, and I wanted to know more of their story. So we had the opportunity on our second day in community to walk them home. So I put my hand up to walk these children home, and we went to this house, and it had this beautiful big yard and quite a small place really in the house. And I think it wasn't as much their lack of stuff that they had, which has definitely struck me in the past. I think for me it was more an emotional loneliness that really caught me with this family. It was getting dark and we were dropping them off, but as we walked, like, their smiles got less and less. And when we dropped them off, we were saying, oh, where's your family? But we found out that their mum leaves before light, so she'd be leaving at about 5 in the morning to go and do work or find work, and then she doesn't actually get home until it's after dark. So Army does everything. He gets his sisters up, I don't know if they have breakfast, but he gets them ready for school, he drops them at school even though they're in different spots, and he's basically the sole carer of these children. So I think just watching the gentleness in his attitude and how beautifully he looked after his sisters and took that responsibility, it's so amazing, because there's a lack of men in our communities in South Africa, and they're just not a presence. And so I think it was so beautiful to see his innocence and how young he was, and he just so badly wanted to look after his sisters. And so that was really special. But I think the hardest part was leaving them at their house. The 3 of them kind of sat on the stair because they were just waiting for nothing. Like, what do they do after you drop them off? They don't have any iPads, they don't have any TVs, they don't have anything. So I think the most heartbreaking thing was walking away, and they were just sitting there. Like, can you picture it? The 3 of them just all sitting and just waving. And they didn't stop waving until we were out of the distance, like until we couldn't see them anymore. And I just suddenly went, they've got nothing to do. Like, they don't have a parent to come and cook them dinner. They don't have, they can't just sit and watch a TV show because they're tired. They don't have a book to pull out and read to entertain them. So they're literally just going to sit there until they fall asleep. And I think that was just really hard to kind of watch and just go. But then just the love that they have for one another and that they have one another. So that was really special. But they are the 3 children, like Jana was mentioning, that Jen challenged us as a team to be praying for their children, Hands at Work's children. So they're definitely going to be the 3 that I pray for. So anyway, so my lesson that I learnt, they were very impactful. And I think as they're at the care point longer, we'll get to see, hopefully if I go in the next coming years, we'll get to see some of the beauty come out of that, like was being mentioned, that when you track with communities, you can watch how the children grow. But the biggest lesson that I learnt in the last week, which I wish I had learnt in the first week, was something that Kara taught me. So I just did not have time to do my Bible reading, and that's very unusual for me. Normally Africa is where I find that time, but I just couldn't find time this time. And Kara goes, well, that's it, you're going to get up at 6 o'clock with me, and the sun will be rising and we'll read our Bibles together. And I was like, oh, okay, I'll go to bed really early so that I'm not tired for our Bible reading, and I'll get up. That night, unfortunately, we started talking in the bathroom for about 2 hours, and then it got very late, and then I went to bed, and then the bathroom is external to where you stay, and we were staying not at Hands, this is at somewhere else, and I knew that there was potentially leopards around, and also giraffes. So to go to the toilet at night is very worrying. And so for 45 minutes I was trying to convince myself that I didn't need to go to the toilet because I didn't want to go by myself. And then I just decided at 12:30 at night, I'm just going to go. So I just bolted as fast as I could and went to the toilet. And then, but because of that, it meant that by the time I got up for Cara in the morning, I was so shattered. And anyway, Cara was telling me, I think more telling herself, but then I learnt from it, which happens a lot. She was like, oh, I've been really challenged to just be thankful in all circumstances. Like, doesn't matter how tired you are, doesn't matter if you're sick, whatever it is, you can choose to have a positive attitude. And I was like, oh, okay. I'm feeling really grumpy this morning because I didn't have much sleep. But for some reason, something clicked in for me. And I think the term was crazy for me leading up to taking the team. It was such a busy time. Every day was filled from the moment you woke up to the moment you went to sleep. And I was so tired. And I think it was that reminder that despite being tired, I could also choose to be happy. And by choose, I mean that I needed help. So there's this verse in 2 Corinthians, which is very well known, but it's talking about when someone has been persecuted, and then he just says, three times I pleaded with the Lord to take it away from me, but he said to me, my grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. And I suddenly realised with Cara at 6 in the morning that it's actually better that I go into my day feeling weak. It's better that I go into my day feeling tired or feeling sick or feeling run down, because actually then it's not about me and it's about God and what he does. And so weirdly, if you change your thinking and think, oh, I'm feeling not great today, you can actually go, good stuff. Like, that means that I'm at a good place for God to do work. And so I was the happiest on those last 3 days, and I can't explain why. I was just jumping in the bath and I was so excited. I think I had a little bit too much energy for my Audrey because she was feeling lower and lower, and I was very excitable. But it was because despite my struggles with feeling tired, I had that sort of energy. And it's funny because I've come home and it's been the same. It's been such a hard week. I've been really sick since coming home, and I have been so tired and jet lagged. But every day I'm like, I'm going to go and I'm going to choose to be happy because his power is made perfect in weakness. And you still go through moments where you struggle, but I think in general I've had more of a happiness as my week has gone on. And I think I just see so many people in our culture, because we're so fast-paced, like everyone is moving so quickly, they just never stop. And so they get so tired and then they get grumpy. And I say that with complete humility because that's me. And I just see it and I just feel tired. I feel tired watching other people. I don't personally, I can deal with my own stuff and I can sort of not be tired if I go to bed early enough, but then I watch other people and it makes me tired to watch other people. So my biggest lesson that I'm trying to learn from being home is, how do I slow it down? But how do I, even when it gets busy, how do I then have an attitude that is still positive and letting God work through my tiredness rather than being angry at him because I'm so busy. So that's one of the biggest lessons. I do have another one, but with time I'm not going to share it, so I might share it at another stage. But thank you.
I know it's a bit late, so I might potentially. It's all right. Okay, keep going. Okay, I'll tell the story quickly of this boy. So he's a very special boy to me. So I've been over to Africa a number of times now, and I think this is my 4th trip since 2013, and each time since 2013 I've actually been able to see this boy, which is really special. So I met him, first in 2013, and he was 8 years old. And I met him at one of the care points. This was the community we were in the first week, so it's called Maluti. And he was there with his 2 younger nephews, actually. Their names were Kakleko and Mpile, and I can't remember, this boy's name is Nombet. And so it's similar to what Tamara was saying. There's kids everywhere, but sometimes you're just kind of drawn to kids. And for me, it was these 3. And I suppose what really drew me to them was just how obvious their brokenness was. So Nombet, he's really quiet boy and really small for his age. He's 13 actually, and you can't really tell from this photo as much, but he's tiny. And he's HIV positive. and very sick. He stopped going to school, I think around 2014. I'm not sure why. He has learning difficulties and would always struggle with school. His home life isn't good either. He lives. When I met him in 2013, he lived with his parents, who were both often drunk and abusive towards the kids. He was the youngest of all his siblings. Because he was also so small, the family was quite poor. They often didn't have enough food for everyone, and so actually it turned into a bit of a free-for-all. So the biggest kids would actually get the food because they were the biggest ones, and Nomvet and his two little nephews wouldn't get anything because they're the smallest. And often you'd actually see little burns on their arms from even just trying to get in and get a little bit of food. It's just absolutely devastating circumstance. Like little Mpile was the youngest. He was probably about 2, and he was just super clingy. Just wanted to be held. He just absolutely smelt like urine. He would just wet himself. He wasn't cared for. And then Kakleko. So Mpile was really clingy and just wanted attention, whereas Kakleko was completely despondent. Like I couldn't get anything out of Kakleko. I don't think the whole time I don't think I ever saw him smile. And then there's Nomvet, who also is very quiet, just very broken. I was chatting to him just through a translator, and I was asking sort of what he likes to do, and he said he likes to sing. And I was like, oh, that's great. Can you sing me something? But he said that he can't sing anything because his mum took away all his songs. Or took them all to the bar or the pub or something like that. So it was just, devastating brokenness on a whole new level for me. But I actually had the privilege of getting to walk them home, and as Tamara was saying, there's something just really special about getting to walk these kids home. I had Nomvet and Kakleko. I was holding both their hands, and I had Mpile like holding onto my head on my shoulders. And I was just like, oh, I really hope they hold on. But as we were walking, it was just a really special moment, because actually Nomvet just started to sing. I think he was just singing like the South African national anthem or something like that. But it was just this really beautiful moment. But then I got to their house, and it was like Tamara said, I had to leave them there, and actually they pointed out which house was theirs, but before we even got into their front yard, the kids actually just sort of sat down in another family's yard. I was like, this is really weird, but they just didn't want to go home. They just sat there, and so I just sat with them for far too long, because I was there by myself at that point, and I knew I needed to get back to the care point before it was too late, and so I had to just sort of leave them there. And that was just one of the hardest things I've ever had to do, I think. Hello. One of the really special things is I've actually been able to see this boy each time since I've come back, as I said. And I think each time I've seen him, his situation, both his nephews have been able to move out and move to, I think, an uncle or an auntie or somewhere else, which is really great. And I've heard it's a better situation where they are now, but Nomvet is still at home. But each time I saw him in 2015 and I saw him in 2017, and each time he was getting worse. He wasn't going to school. You could just see how despondent and broken he was. Even though I'd met him before, I just couldn't get anything out of him, even less than the first time I met him. But actually this trip was more special because actually it's the first time that his situation's gotten better. So in the midst of all that brokenness, it was just a really great reminder of the hope that actually is there. One of the people at Hands at Work one of their African leaders has really taken him under his wing, and they've just been advocating for him, and they've managed to get him into a special needs school. And that's been for most of this year. And just the change that you can see in him is just, it's crazy. It's like he's a new boy, still with so much brokenness. But yeah, so that for me was really special. He's a really special boy for me. So yeah, that was a real encouragement. And so I suppose just in a sense, in a way, sort of wrapping up and sort of talking about what I've personally learned. First, I wanted to mention, I forgot to say at the start, thank you so much as a PACC family for how you've supported us and been praying for us. I think I can genuinely say that so much of the success of the trip in a lot of ways is due to prayer. Like, we've had so many people praying for each member of the team, and so I don't think we can understate the importance of that. And because you can see sort of the impact that it's had on each person who's come up to share. It's been a tough time, but it's really been a special time as well. So I thought I'd just finish by reading a passage in Isaiah 58 that actually Cara read out to us when we started our trip, and was kind of became a bit of a theme for us as we were going into communities. So it's in Isaiah 58, and he's talking about this idea of true fasting. And so sort of from halfway through verse 9, it says, "If you do away with the yoke of oppression, with the pointing finger and malicious talk, if you spend yourself on behalf of the hungry," or in another version it says, "if you pour yourself out on behalf of the hungry and satisfy the needs of the oppressed, then your light will rise in the darkness and your night will become like the noonday." And I think that became a little bit of a theme for us. You know, we're going to these care points and they're like these little glimmers of hope and light in the darkness. And that was kind of, particularly in the last community that we're in where we did the painting project, we were just hearing each night, because we were there for a few days in a row, each night we were hearing more and more stories of the brokenness in that community, and just how these kids are just craving love, and they're looking on all the wrong places for it. Teen pregnancy is so high, alcohol abuse is just massive in that community, unemployment is huge. And so for us coming into that, I think in a sense we were like, as a team, like these verses were like, we just got to pour ourselves out on behalf of these guys, And the amazing thing is, in the midst of that darkness, Jesus actually creates light. There's actually a light that comes out of that. And, that's what Cara was saying actually in our final debrief. Often people, when they come to Africa, they talk about the joy that they see in the kids, which is true. Like, when you're at the care points, these kids are so joyful, but it's actually a really stark contrast to what their everyday life is. These are like kids like non-vet, that's the situations that they come from. And yet, despite that, they actually have the ability to have joy when they come to these care points. And so that's only Jesus. And so, I thought I'd just finish with that. There's so much brokenness, but there's just so much hope in the midst of that. So thank you for all of you for coming and listening to our stories. I hope you've had a few things that you've been able to take away from it, and thank you for your prayers as well. We really appreciate it.
Well, thank you, team, and thank you for all of you that have listened so patiently. In some ways, it's almost therapeutic for the team to be actually able to share, because it's a bit like you come back and you don't know how to share because something deeply inside you has been changed. But how do you express that in words? In many ways, you can't. And so I can sense their frustration. There's so much there that they wanted to communicate, but it's hard to communicate it, because actually being there, actually feeling, is actually having that child in your arms, is actually feeling that child run his fingers through your hair, and then you see in their eyes both joy and sadness, and those images stay with you, and you come home and you know that your life has been changed, and somehow there's a part of you that's got to now act on behalf of that child. And it's one of the impressions that you get once you go into something like Africa or other contexts, other mission contexts. I've often described it as I no longer became just an Australian Christian. I now became an international one, in the sense that they are my brothers and sisters whom I now have responsibility to care for. And so you can no longer see yourself merely as local. You have to see yourself as international, which is actually what the body of Christ is anyway. So thank you, team. We really appreciate your time sharing with us. And we ask God's blessing upon you as you process now, because that's really the processing of it is the challenge. Well, let me just pray. We won't have our final song, guys. We'll just leave it there. And thank you so much for your time. You're going to come and pray with me? She's very generous. She wants to share all the things. But let me just pray. Father, thank you so much for your love for those children in Africa. We thank you, Father, that you watch as each one of them goes to bed at night and cries because they feel so alone and they feel so without hope. And we thank you, Father, that that's not unknown to you, and so you've acted to bring them joy and hope through hands and through others that go. And so we thank you, Father, that you're their defender, and that as you watch them cry, you're already planning how you're going to meet that need for them. And so we thank you for the team that's gone and the way they've been able to be a little instrument in your purpose as a blessing for those children. Bless us as we go into our week. Help us, Father, to live in light of those realities. And, Father, to be thankful. And, Father, to be hopeful because of what Jesus has done and because Jesus came to be one of us. And so we thank you in his name. Amen. God bless you and have a great week.